So this is my Massey 12 horse. Dates back to 1973, I believe. When I bought it, it was 100% original. It had the original Tecumseh HH120 in it. I planned on keeping it original, but I think this engine was starting to have problems. Probably the rings or the valves were going bad because it didn't have much compression anymore. And it probably needed new gaskets too because it was leaking a bunch of oil. And when the engine's hot, that oil starts sizzling on the cast iron and making a bunch of smoke. Anyways, I didn't have the knowledge or the willpower to fix this whole thing up, so I finally caved and decided I should just do an engine swap. And that's what this video is going to be about, is just some tips and tricks for anyone else looking to swap the engine in their Massey 12 horse. I installed a Honda clone, Predator 420. So this tractor is the geared version. So it's got the 4-speed with a reverse, plus the variable speed to adjust what speed you're going in each gear. So for getting the Predator 420 installed, some good things to know. The bolt pattern for bolting the engine onto the frame matches up perfectly with the original, so that's a real time saver. And also the main drive belt doesn't need to be changed. You can use the original size. Just one thing you want to keep in mind when you're getting that looped onto the pulley is you want to set your variable speed to the lowest speed. That's going to open up the variable pulley as wide as it goes, so the belt has more room to move forwards and slip over the pulley. Now this is a wide belt, 7/8 of an inch wide, so you're going to want to keep the original pulley, take it off the old motor, slide it onto the new motor. The original motor has 1.25 inch shaft, but the Predator has a 1-inch shaft. So you can find on Amazon a kit that's a sleeve that'll widen this shaft up to 1.25 inches. And then you'll need a special key that sits a little taller just to make up that extra gap. What else is there to cover? Oh yes. For power, these Predators don't really make much electricity. The charging coil, or the stator, that comes with the engine is just this little thing. I guess it only makes about 2 or 3 amps worth of power, which isn't really enough to run your lights and your starter, at least not reliably. So what I did is I found a kit on Amazon. It's basically 2 of these wired together with 1 wire coming out to your battery. The engine already has spots for both the stators to be bolted in. You just want to be careful when you put it in though. This bump that sticks out here, that's meant to fit into the engine. If you have it backwards and that's sticking out, your bolt's going to sit too high and rub against the flywheel. So be careful of that. As far as getting everything to fit in here, it's a bit of a tight fit. What I decided to do was do away with the gas tank that comes on the motor because that was going to interfere with the old gas tank. So really you got to pick one or the other. I went with the original gas tank to keep things as original as possible. And there's these 4 posts here that the old gas tank sits on. If you want to preserve the original battery box, you're going to have to cut that post a little short. And the other 3, will stay open for mounting whatever you need. Cables, controls, fuel lines. For the fuel line coming off the old original gas tank, that takes a 1/4 inch inside diameter tube, and the Predator takes a smaller tube, a 3/16. So what I did is I found this fitting here. It's a 90-degree fitting. On one side it's 1/4 inch, on the other side it's 3/16. So that was a good way of converting between the two sizes of tube. And it also gave me the chance to mount it on one of the posts where the original gas tank was mounted, or the Predator's gas tank, I should say. So everything's nicely secured, keeps everything nice and tight in place, and it accommodates the two sizes of tubes. So that worked out pretty well. Another thing for fitment is your intake. The Predator has this air box here that would normally sit over the filter, but that does not fit, so you have to do away with that and just leave the filter exposed. And that way it just barely fits. And I mean just barely. I actually had to shave down the stud that nut for the carb in the intake sits on. Aside from that, everything fits pretty well. The choke cable, I just drilled a hole through the choke lever here and put that through, and it works pretty well. Now when it comes to the exhaust that comes on the Predator will not fit. I've seen a lot of people who would simply go and cut out the grill to accommodate that big exhaust, but personally I'm not a fan of that. So I cut off the flange that the Predator exhaust mounts on, and I preserved that so everything bolts in nicely, and then I just welded on my own exhaust that fits around and out behind the grill and under the hood. So when the hood's closed, it's a perfect fit. Now, one thing that people have told me about these Predator engines is that you need a certain amount of restriction in the exhaust. Otherwise, it'll run a little too quick and a little too hot, and that can damage the engine. So what I did is I put a baffle in here, inside here. It's just a plate that I welded into place, and I drilled a bunch of holes through it. When I started it up for the first time, I realized there wasn't enough restriction. So as a way of kind of adjusting and moderating how much restriction there is, I went back to the welder and I put this little plate inside of here. So that adds a second layer of restriction, and it's a lot more accessible. So if you need a little more or a little less restriction, you can add another bead of weld and kind of make more restriction, or you can take your die grinder and remove some and get a little less restriction, and that's how you can kind of fine tune your homemade exhaust. And then I found some high temp paint in red, and I figured that would match nicely with the rest of the tractor, so that's what I did. Unfortunately, with enough running of the engine, it will fade. It won't stay red forever, but at least the part that actually shows when the hood is closed, that's still red, and I think it'll stay cool enough that it won't fade and turn gray. Yeah. Another thing I did in terms of power, I had upgraded the stator. I was making about 6 amps instead of 3. And another way to conserve power so I don't drain my battery is I swapped out the original lights for some LEDs. And you can find LEDs now on Amazon that are the same size, shape, made of glass. They practically look like the original thing, but inside it's LED. I redid all the wiring. I figured out how to wire in the amp meter so I can keep track of if I'm making or losing power. Now, one thing though that does bug me is that since this makes such a small amount of power, or electricity I should say, and also because it consumes such a small amount of electricity, you barely get a reading on here. Like this goes up to positive and negative 30, and I'll only see it running at, well, positive or negative a couple of amps. Maybe plus or minus 2 or 3 at a time. It's kind of hard to read. I might have to get a different gauge with smaller increments to make the reading a little more obvious, a little easier to read. But aside from that, I think it's been quite a success. I repainted the pull start cover to match. I did it red, which matches nicely. I'm happy with that. And the cover behind it, it came in black, and I'm okay with it for now, but I might change that to gray or like a silver color, because the frame originally was silver, and so was the engine. So I might do that just to get back to a more original look, but for now I'm happy with that. I've got the mower deck for it, and I used it this summer. It was working pretty well, but could probably use some new bearings or a little bit of a refresher on that. Plan on pushing snow with it this winter, and that's what this bracket is for. Some of you, if you have a keen eye, you might recognize that's pretty similar to the original snow blade that they sold. And stay tuned for my next video, because I'll show you the plow, my homemade plow that I made for this. So I need to issue some little corrections to what I said earlier in the video. When you want to get your belt installed, you don't want it in the slowest speed, you want it in the fastest speed. And that's how you're going to open up the pulley to give you the most loose and the most reach to get around the pulley on the engine. And I said that the original belt fits, and it does fit, but I just took it out for a little test drive, my first test drive, and when I pushed the clutch in, this is pretty tight and doesn't totally engage. So when I'm trying to shift gears, the gears in the transaxle are still getting a little bit of power from the engine, and they keep turning, which makes it hard to shift. If you're familiar with how these normally run, if the gears are turning in there and you can't shift, you just gotta wait a second or two and they'll lose momentum and stop spinning, and then you can shift. But here they keep getting a little bit of power from the engine, and shifting is a challenge. The reason for that is that the crankshaft, if you're measuring in terms of front to back, it sits at the same position as the original engine. And you can see I marked with a piece of tape here before removing the original engine where that crankshaft was located in terms of front to back, and it lines up. It's still the same. The big difference here is that it sits just a little higher than the original engine. And so that increases your distance between the two pulleys and makes this belt a lot tighter. So even when I push the clutch all the way in, it's still rubbing and it's still making the belt turn a little bit. It's still transmitting some power to the transaxle. So it's still a work in progress. I'm going to do some research and see if I can't find another belt like this, just 1 inch longer. I'm hoping to find one, but I tried searching the other day for replacement belts, and they're hard to come by in any size other than the original. So I might have to look quite a bit before I find one. But anyways, if I find a solution, I'll make another video and report back.